This is the Puck Poolies podcast with Matt Larkin and Stephen Ellis.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Puck Poolies. Season 2 rages on. It's technically episode 2, but it kind of feels like this is the launch. We are now officially back to our weekly schedule. I'm here with Stephen Ellis, as always, to talk some fantasy hockey. And Stephen, I know you've been busy. Have you been kind of checking out prospects? Were you in Buffalo recently? What's going on, my friend?
Buffalo's coming up this week. I was in Buffalo this past weekend to go shopping. It was kind of fun to just go. It went to, 8 Walmarts and 7 Targets, and it was just kind of like part of it was looking for specific M&Ms, fudge M&Ms. They seem to not have them anymore. But have you ever heard of Pepsi Nitro?
It rings a bell. Is it like extra caffeinated?
No, well, not to my understanding. It's kind of like it's like a nitro drink at like it's kind of made like almost like it's really smooth. It's supposed to be kind of almost like a beer type texture. It's supposed to be like more of a creamier thing. And I really wanted to try it, and I had it, and it was just whatever. But it was fine. I chased around. It was just kind of something to do on a Saturday in a rare time where I didn't have anything to do. It's been a lot of racing, a lot of hockey this summer. Buffalo Prospects Tournament, cannot wait. Shout out to Chefs in Buffalo.
I still haven't been to Chefs, and I've tried to go to Dinosaur Barbecue as well. It was too crowded. I couldn't get in, but one of these times I'll hit up both.
Well, it's funny. Actually, I tried to go to Chefs when I was there on Saturday, but they didn't open till 3:00 p.m. on a Saturday.
Missed opportunity.
That's very weird. It's only open for 5 hours on a Saturday. I don't know. That one's weird. I know Buffalo could be a bit quiet on the weekends when there's no one going downtown, but that seems odd.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. Wow. Okay, Stephen. Well, let's launch into the episode. And before we get, deep into fantasy player ranking discussion, all that kind of stuff, we're sort of just gearing up for training camp now. And there are a few off-season storylines that have sort of been weighing on my mind in terms of things that will have major implications for the fantasy draft season. So let's start with diving into a few of those.
All right. So I guess kind of just we're looking at which fantasy storyline is most important in training camps. And I guess we could start off talking about what Connor Bedard's going to be doing.
Yes, the Connor Bedard line deployment, I think, is very important. Not so much for where you're picking Connor Bedard, because he's going to be the driver. I don't think it's going to really matter who he plays with, unless for some reason it's Taylor Hall playing on a different line. But what really matters is who is going to be the right winger. If we assume Taylor Hall is the left winger, is it going to be Lucas Reichel playing his opposition? Is it going to be Taylor Radish, who's sort of broken out as a 20-goal scorer? Andreas Athanasiou? Is it Tyler Johnson? Is it someone else that we haven't even thought of? So that's going to be a very important storyline to watch throughout training camp in the preseason. Whoever does land on that line is going to be immediately draftable, and whoever loses that battle is going to be someone who falls off the radar, which is particularly important, as we discussed in a previous episode, for Lucas Reichel. He's someone that we both like as a sleeper, but if he's not on that top line, it changes his outlook a little bit. So keep very close eye on that battle.
All right. Another battle that'll be very interesting is the Leafs' first line left wing job. Because when you look at it, there's Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, Matthew Knies. Hey, maybe Sam Lafferty's on the top line. Probably not. But I guess kind of what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a very important battle, and I think Michael Bunting is sort of the case study to prove it, right? He puts together back-to-back 23-goal seasons with the Leafs. We know that whoever gets that job and sticks in that job is in for a very plum fantasy assignment. It's typically with Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner. Occasionally, William Nylander rotates into the top line right wing spot, but we know it's a dominant top line. So it looks like at the moment we're expecting Tyler Bertuzzi to get the first crack. But you can't sleep on Max Domi, the old London Knights connection with Mitch Marner. And of course, Matthew Knies is someone who the Leafs envision as the long-term, probably, number one left winger. That's why they signed Bertuzzi and Domi to one-year deals. So what really is important to me, it's not just the winner of that battle for the frontline left wing spot. It's also whoever the top two are in that battle. So if you don't get the first line job while you're playing on line two with Tavares and William Nylander, that's still another great fantasy situation. But whoever ends up the odd man out and is the third left winger, that's a big blow to the fantasy value. It's a big drop off if you're playing on line three. So whoever loses it between Domi, Knies, and Bertuzzi is going to have to fall in the ranks. So that's a very important battle to watch.
And as much as I love the idea of Marner and Domi playing together again, I guess the one thing to keep in mind is that was almost a full decade ago since the last time they played. So, Marner has played with some other players since then, but I would still like it. I know they're still friends, and the London Knights connection is always fun to see. Last one we got here, the Boston Bruins top six forward group, because this team took some major hits this summer. Like just off the top of my head, Bergeron, Krejci, Bertuzzi. It's like, uh-oh.
Yeah, that's right. Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno,
Yeah.
Garnet Hathaway, it goes on and on and on. The Bruins were absolutely decimated. And we have to look at who's left in that top six. And I think the only combination we can really feel confident in is seeing Pavel Zacha play with David Pastrnak. So that, I think, is going to be a top line combo. They already made really nice music together on the check line last year with David Krejci. We're probably going to see Pavel Zacha play center this year. And he is obviously a major breakout pick. Broke out last year, but I think we're going to see Pavel Zacha jump up again from the 50-point range to maybe the 60 or 70-point range. But what's very interesting to figure out in Boston is who else is going to play on that line? Will it be James Van Riemsdyk? Will that drop Brad Marchand down to the second line? Or will Jim Montgomery load up the first line, go with Marchand, Zacha, and Pastrnak, make a super line? That could be a boon to everyone's fantasy value, all three of those players. Or do you move Jake DeBrusk over, play him on the left wing? He's played left wing plenty of times in his career. So it's really important to see how that shakes out. And the second line is going to be a lot less exciting. It's going to be Charlie Coyle and some combination. I'm predicting it's going to be Marchand, Coyle, DeBrusk, line 2, James Van Riemsdyk, and Zacha and Pastrnak, line 1. Although I'd love to see Marchand get a shot on the first line. So keep a very close eye. Preseason, training camp, line deployments, and see who ends up winning that battle.
The Boston Bruins are going to be looking very different next year, and I'm not sure I'm ready to see that. I kind of expected, no matter what, a regression from this team. Like last year was really good, but two of those key players were going to be older if they returned, but they didn't return, and they didn't come in and bring a big replacement for the guys that left. So it's going to be an interesting one for sure. Let's talk a bit about some league winners in your rankings, I guess. And brief, words are hard to say. Apparently, let's start with Evan Bouchard. What are your thoughts on him and why he could be a league winner for you?
And don't worry about the words, Steven. It's preseason for us too. Okay, we're still working out the kinks. You got to just get the brain working at proper full regular season level again. So we still got a few weeks. It's all good. And first, I just want to define what a league winner is. And when I say league winner, what I mean is if you get a player who returns value that is the equivalent of a player several rounds later, it's kind of like cheating, right? If you get a 9th round pick who performs like a 4th round pick, well, it's like you had an extra 4th round pick. So it gives your team such an advantage that those players are what you define as league winners, because often you'll see, like a perfect example being the team that drafted Tage Thompson several rounds into the draft last year often went deep or won their league, right? If you look at the percentage of teams that had Tage Thompson, because it was such a cheat code, basically getting an extra 1st round pick in, the 3rd or 4th round. So the first one, so after that digression, Evan Bouchard, to me, that's the definition of a league winner. He had 36 points in 33 games, including the playoffs, after Tyson Barrie was traded away. So you have Evan Bouchard, power play 1 on literally the best power play in NHL history, now for a full season. He had 17 points, I believe, in 12 playoff games. So I think it's a 60-point floor. I think we could see something like an 80-point season out of Evan Bouchard. The fantasy environment is just so sexy there, and he is their primary puck mover now on offense. So to me, if he's someone you can get several rounds into your draft, he could easily end up performing as a top 5 or top 10 fantasy defenseman this year.
Yeah, I don't know if I go 80 points. I think 50 points would be a good start. Either way, I think he would be a much more valuable guy than in the past, and definitely a guy they'd want to pick up. I'm definitely targeting him, and I'm in a draft. They're in a league this year. It's 12 teams, and it's a lot more. It's all scouts, and the issue is things like looking for Evan Bouchard to take that next step. Unfortunately, everyone kind of knows that.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of guys that scouts love, Devin Levi.
Yes, Devin Levi. And I have to give a disclaimer here. When I say league winners, it doesn't mean these players don't have risk.
Yes.
Some of these players could end up not even playing in the NHL this year, right? But the point is, it's someone who, if they hit, they can completely change your team's fate. So Devin Levi, I was cautious throughout the summer in my ranking of him, but I really like the fact that Buffalo is not including him in the prospects challenge. To me, the message there is, no, we're not sending you there for development. We need to hold on to you because we're going to start deploying you hopefully in a starting role, or at least they want him to win that job. So yes, he's undersized. There's certainly a lot of risk there. We've seen with Spencer Knight, for example, when hype can get out of control and a player is anointed before he's even really done anything, that risk is all still there. But so is the upside. Devin Levi is one of the best goaltending prospects in the world, and he's joining a team that's really on the ascension. So if he hits, this could be an absolute monster breakout. And if you get him as your second or third goalie with a later round pick, well, that's just unfair what he can do in terms of the upside for your team.
I'd almost argue if there's a guy that picked to win the Calder that isn't going to be Connor Bedard, it could be Devin Levi, just for the potential that if he does go on this heater and brings the Sabres to the playoffs, that gives him a pretty good argument there. But of course, we know what Connor Bedard could do. But I will also point out, Connor McDavid didn't win the Calder Trophy. He did get her in his season, but you never know what happens here. Speaking of players with a lot of risk, Seth Jones. On the ice, he can be a bit of a mess defensively, but we know he could put up points, and he's going to have a guy named Connor Bedard to pass to this year.
Yeah, it's weird for me to be bullish on Seth Jones. He's been sort of a shy away guy for the last several seasons of his career. And obviously, once those analytics kind of went south, his overall reputation as a quality player has really taken a beating. But if you look at the environment, so last year with nothing, with so little help, he still managed 12 goals, 37 points, and some above average contributions in the banger categories and the shot category. He actually held his own other than the bad plus minus. Now you have a big influx of talent. So, of course, Connor Bedard, you have Taylor Hall, a full season, ideally, of Lucas Reichel. There are just so many more players around him that can put the puck in the net that there are going to be players finishing his chances. So suddenly 12 goals, 25 assists could end up being 12 goals, 38 assists, 50 points, right? Because there's going to be more people to help him out. He's going to be in that plum spot on the power play. So hopefully Chicago scores enough to just get that plus minus a little more palatable. Even if you get Seth Jones and he's a minus 15 this year, then I think he's actually going to be quite a useful player in fantasy, very underrated.
Yep, I 100% agree. And Seth Jones actually turned to be a very valuable player for one of my teams that I played against in fantasy this year. I felt like every time Seth Jones had a good week, I happened to be playing against the guy who had Seth Jones, and that did not go so well. A player that I really like, Wyatt Johnson out of Dallas, a player that I would like to point out when he got drafted, I think everyone was shocked he got drafted as high as he was, and it looks like an absolute steal of a pick right now.
Yes, Wyatt Johnson of the Dallas Stars. When I put him down on my list for this episode, I knew you'd be excited. I know he's your guy, and I can't blame you. So 24 goals as a rookie with the Dallas Stars for Wyatt Johnson, and he did that only playing 15 minutes a game. So in terms of 5-on-5 goals per 60 minutes, he was in the 90th percentile. So scoring at an almost elite rate, and theoretically his ice time should continue to grow. He's pretty secure right now as the number 2 center. Yes, of course, you have to keep an eye on Matt Duchene, but I think it's more likely you see Duchene playing the right wing or maybe third line center. I think Dallas wants to keep developing Johnston. I think he's proven himself to be a really good top 6 forward. So to me, if he already scores 24 goals as a rookie with that limited deployment, I think 30 is definitely not out of the question. But when I was looking at his Yahoo ADP a couple weeks back, I think he was not even going drafted in the top 200. So it's still just absolute thievery right now when it comes to Wyatt Johnson, someone who could be the cheapest 30-goal scorer you can find.
By the way, my 4-team league is now 16.
Oh my God, 6 teams! My dad's gonna be excited. He was like, "Yeah, tell Steven to get a bigger league."
Come on. I'm in 3 leagues. I got one that's 20 teams, one that's 12, and one that's now 6. But the 6 was way too much fun. We came down to the wire it was literally like 8 points separating 4 teams. It was great. To finish off this section, though, the guy that we are definitely going to talk about later in this one is Joseph Woll, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think a guy that we had a bit of a discussion yesterday and talking about it, and I think that signing Martin Jones, and I know most people are kind of writing that off and saying, whatever. It's like he's there to start training camp, have an extra body, see what happens, and then I'll go put on waivers. But it's like there's other guys that could put on waivers. I feel like just given the circumstances of Toronto's goalies the last couple of years, you'd almost want to have that third goalie ready to go. And they don't have a really capable guy in the AHL this year. That's the thing. The AHL for the Marlies, they're going a lot younger this year and a lot less experience, and they're bringing some of their prospects over. Not really like Keith Petruzzelli. Is he an NHL caliber goalie? I don't think so. And he's your best call-up option at this point. So Jones gives you this extra backup there, knowing that, both goalies that are there have dealt with pretty significant injuries the last couple of years. So, having Jones there is good. That being said, Joseph Woll could be a starting goalie by November. So I guess, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so many different outcomes that are possible here. And you do raise good points about Martin Jones and the Leafs needing that insurance. And I could see a scenario in which the Leafs keep all three because you could lose Martin Jones if you send him down, and then you lose that depth, like you said. On the other hand, I don't see a scenario in which Joseph Woll gets sent down because he's no longer waivers exempt, so the Leafs could never risk losing him. And if he does perform at the level they hope, it's just amazing to have someone on a deal that cheap as your starter, right? It's great for cap purposes long term as well. And if you look at Ilya Samsonov, he was really good last year. He was actually a top 10 goalie during the regular season, but the injuries, they flared up more than once in his career. Inconsistency as well, we saw in the playoffs. And I think Joseph Woll, I just like his makeup. He was red hot in the AHL last year, came up to the NHL. He was dominant, 932 save percentage. He looked very poised during the playoffs. The moment was not too big for him. He's big, he's athletic. I think he's got the right level of swagger, not cockiness, but confidence in his game. I think he just has everything you want to see in someone who's a long-term number one goaltender. So I am quite a believer. And I'm not saying for sure that he wins the job, but if I'm placing my chips on one of those three goaltenders to be the starter by the end of the year, I think it's going to be Woll. And if you do win that job and become the Leafs 1A, well, that's a team that usually wins 50 games in its sleep and has played underrated, well above average defense in the last couple seasons, despite the reputation previously of not being good defensively. It's not true anymore. So good defensive team that's also going to score a lot of goals, win a lot of games, and you're a rising young goaltender. To me, that's potential to be massively valuable in fantasy. But right now, the cost is not going to be too high because we don't know what's happening. So it's the perfect time to get in on the ground floor, stash Joseph Woll, and if it doesn't work out, no big deal. You're using a late pick on him. But if it does work out, that's the definition of a league winner.
If you play in one of those leagues that when you take a goalie, you also get the backup goalie for that team, like you do, could do a lot worse than Toronto, I guess.
Oh, yes. Very good point. Yes. Yes. So I think next up, Stephen, we're going to transition to the tip of the week, if I remember correctly. Even though I know you're supposed to introduce it, I just decided to take the reins. I don't know why. So I'm going to do it. The tip of the week, we're already talking a little bit, we're looking at a couple rookies. So Joseph Woll is one. We have rookies on the mind. We already talked about Connor McDavid. And I think that's the right mindset to have at this time of year. If you're starting your fantasy draft prep, you're wondering what to pay the most attention to in the news cycle. I wouldn't worry too much about the veterans because they're not going to play as much as they normally would. They're not going to play that much in the preseason, and we're not going to learn too much about them. Teams are going to be saving their veterans. Obviously, they don't want anyone to get hurt in the regular season. What matters most is looking at those rookies and their deployments. So in some cases, will this rookie make the team or not? So someone like Leo Carlson on the Anaheim Ducks, Brant Clark on the LA Kings, players that have really big upside if they make the team. So keeping an eye on them, very important. Other examples would be prospects that are probably going to make the team already, but where are they going to play? So Adam Fantilli, is he going to be a top six forward right away? Logan Cooley, is he going to push Barrett Hayton for the number one center job right away? Things like that. So if you're wondering where to focus your energy this time of year when you're just kind of working out the cobwebs, I would say look closely at the rookies, the prospects, and track their deployment a lot.
Yeah, a couple other guys I'll kind of mention is Simon Nemec, New Jersey Devils, a guy that, the Devils have a bit of a crowded blue line, but he is definitely capable of playing NHL hockey this coming year. And there's almost to a point where Luke Hughes is definitely the better defenseman at this point, but I wouldn't be shocked if we're talking about Nemec being the better defenseman for the Devils down the line, just because I think he's a better defensive player, but he still has that offensive ability there. David Jiricek, another one out of Columbus, where I'm so high on him. I think he's going to be an incredible defenseman, a number one defenseman on that team down the line. But they went out there, got Provorov and Damon Severson, and Zach Werenski's back. So that makes that route a little bit tougher. Matthew Nyes, again, could be first line, could be third line. We don't know on how that's going to work. And there is a difference between the caliber of players on that first line in Toronto and the calibers on the third line. Joel Hofer, another one out of St. Louis, who, maybe he's the starting goalie come like February. Like that's the thing about St. Louis, where Jordan Binnington is very up and down. When he's up, he's very good, but there's too many downs. And with Hofer, he could go over and take that job. And then Logan Stankoven, another one out of Dallas, where the Stars have a really fun prospect pool. Like it's kind of a mid-pack team, but for a team of that quality to still have some prospects worth getting excited about, Logan Stankoven's definitely one of them. So it'll be interesting to see where he can go in the lineup, whether he plays center or wing. I think just on the team, he'll probably go wing, but he's an unbelievable faceoff guy. I think he led the World Juniors in faceoff percentage in both years. And then one last one. I'm trying to blank on who I wanted to talk about here. Olin Zellweger, the Anaheim Ducks. It's funny looking. I just tweeted about their defense core that they're using at their prospect tournament. Which, by the way, I love the prospect tournament time. It's great. I just wish they all weren't the same weekend. That kind of sucks. But Zellweger, he could play anywhere from top pair to being in the AHL this year. Like that's kind of just the way the Ducks are looking. They have a really poor defense core, but with Zellweger, he's got this high potential. But do you want to rush him right away? The Ducks are going to be a bad team again. You don't need him there, but I think he's capable of playing at least some games there. So those are the guys I'd be looking at.
Okay, it's going to be an amazing rookie class, and we're going to talk a little bit about that with our guest, Nick Alberga. We're going to bring him on right now. Okay, it's time for our first guest of season 2 here at Puck Poolies, and it's probably our favorite guest. I'm just going to throw it out there. He's our buddy. He's our colleague. He's Daily Faceoff's resident fantasy writer, host of Leafs Morning Take, our friend Nick Alberga. Nick, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm fantastic. When you said number one, it reminded me of that Nelly song, one of the best ever that nobody really thinks about, Number One by Nelly. How are you guys? What a start.
My mom, who's 74 years old, legitimately likes Nelly. I don't know why. It's just a thing. She's into Nelly and Pitbull. Nobody can explain it. It's just the way it is. Nick, I know you've been traveling a lot. I've been seeing some of your posts, your tweets, your Instagrams. What was going on this summer? Was it epic?
Yeah, you got to take a load off sometimes. You guys know this, covering the NHL the way we have for the last X amount of years. I decompressed. I planned a bit of a Euro trip. It was like 13 days into Lisbon, Barcelona, Ibiza, and I finished with a couple days in Dublin. So it was like really, really relaxing at times. Sometimes it was really, really busy, but it was a good time. Like it's good to get away if you can, and I try to do that every off season. And this one was no different. How was your summers?
It was good. I was saying before, pretty chilling for me. Not as many weddings, bachelor parties, but just unplugging is crucial. Especially, You have to have those moments where you don't think about hockey. I try to go for it. Where even if I'm traveling, I try not to check my phone. You just gotta reset the brain.
Well, it's funny. It's funny, like you say that too, because I was in, where was I? I was in Lisbon, and of course, the Erik Karlsson trade goes down. It's like, man, can you just leave me alone for a couple weeks? But nonetheless, like GMs act when they want to act. I cover the Leafs. They've made some big news the last couple weeks. I know we're not going to talk about that, but like I'm supposed to still be on vacation a bit, but it's not going that way, unfortunately.
Also, Nick, when you always say that you always want teams to make trades, I always hate it when I see those tweets because those trades always happen at the absolute worst time.
Yeah.
Like when Matt was on vacation and the Karlsson trade was a Saturday, and I'm going to the beach and I'm writing a story on the way to the beach, and it's like, so I don't like when you tweet that. Just so you know.
Okay, fair enough. We'll try to go back on those a bit this year, but that's what makes the NHL fun. Any day you wake up, something big or small could happen. Even as we record this, Adam Lowry's the new captain of the Winnipeg Jets, right?
That's right. And of course, we just heard Torrey Krug injured while training. So who knows what the implications of that injury will be for the St. Louis Blues, a team that I was already not very high on going into the season. But Nick, let's dive in now. Let's do some fantasy talk. And This is great. We have a chance to cross-promote because my first question is about rookies. And Steven, you have a piece on dailyfaceoff.com right now looking at the top 20 Calder Trophy candidates. And one thing Steven points out in the piece is, yes, of course, this is the Connor Bedard year, but this is an absolutely epic rookie class. It might be the most stacked rookie class I've ever seen going into a season. So I'm curious, Nick, in terms of fantasy relevance in year one, if it's not Connor Bedard, who is the rookie you're most excited about?
So I haven't checked out this article just yet, but knowing Steve the way I do, and he's a goalie, I wonder if there's a guy in Buffalo that he's touting quite highly. And I know a lot of people are feeling that way. So to answer your question, Devin Levi would be my guy, just more so because I'm really, really curious to see how he fares in the league. I think it's so interesting, young goalies. I can't remember the last 21-year-old who had an unbelievable body of work over an 82-game slate. We've seen really, really good goalies make a great first impression in the NHL, but the one thing we've learned is there's always turbulency along the way. Like Spencer Knight, if you do recall last year at this time, guys, everybody was talking about it. But I know this isn't more play-induced, although I think he got sick around December, wasn't the same goalie, and certainly a breakout candidate this year is Spencer Knight. But I wonder if it's just going to be like chill and simple and easy. And I don't think it could be that way for the Buffalo Sabres for Devin Levi. So he's probably the guy, aside from Conor McDavid, I'm really, really excited to see this year. I mean, Buffalo hasn't made the playoffs since 2011. There were 5-2 in 7 appearances for Devin Levi last year. So I wonder if this could finally be the year where we see a legitimate goaltender in terms of vying for the Calder Trophy. I know everybody's expecting Conor McDavid to win, and I get that, but a goalie hasn't won the Calder since 2011. What was his name again, Steve?
Oh, wasn't Steve Mason? That was 09, wasn't it?
It's an Oakville boy, Steve Mason.
It was
Yeah.
Steve Mason. It's a trick
Yeah.
question because we're Oakville guys, right?
Yeah. Well,
There you
so
go.
it's funny. So we're talking about Devin Levi, and I kind of wrote my piece, and like I expect growing pains here. We are still talking about a guy who's quite small by NHL standards, and that could be difficult. Buffalo does have a bit of a goalie carousel. You notice how they haven't got rid of Eric Comrie yet,
Mhm.
and that gives them that extra bit of flexibility in that situation there. And they also have Luokin in there, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. At the time of this, the Buffalo Sabres have not released a prospect camp roster. It'd be interesting to see if Devin Levi's there. I doubt it, but I think also because Buffalo, everyone expects them to kind of take that next step forward soon, but they weren't a playoff team last year. They haven't been a playoff team in quite a long time. What's one more year of giving the young guys all the opportunities to learn, all the problems with that? Don't penalize him for having a couple of rough stretches. Give him as many starts as you possibly can to see if he's really your guy and see what happens there. So that's kind of my thought. But now you're talking about all the vacation you've been on, but I just know that you probably were like one night, maybe middle of August, you're like, there's just one sleeper that's stuck in my head that I really need to talk about. So who's the draft deep sleeper that you can't get out of your mind right now?
So this started on free agency day, believe it or not, July 1, July 2, that area. And I have two of them because I couldn't decide between the two. And they're both signing with teams who include former teammates back from their junior days. So I'm starting with Connor Brown of the Edmonton Oilers. I just can't get him on my head. I know it's not going to work out. I can tell you right now. We think, oh my goodness, Connor Brown's back with Connor McDavid. It's going to be a match made in heaven. It's going to be perfection. I'm not sure about that just yet. I think Connor Brown's better suited for the third line, but obviously they're going to give him a shot in that top line. And the other one is Jonathan Drouin, right? He's back with his former Halifax Mooseheads teammate in Nathan MacKinnon in Colorado. If there's one way that Jonathan Drouin's going to refine his game and his career after his time in Montreal, it's with Colorado riding shotgun with MacKinnon and Rantanen. But again, it's fair to be skeptical on both fronts. I mean, Brown played 4 games last year coming off ACL surgery. That's tough to come off. And of course, Drouin had 2 goals last year and 29 points. So that's why these guys are sleepers, because it could work out. It might not work out. So those are the 2 names that come to mind for me, guys.
I love those picks. And I particularly like Drouin as a deep, deep sleeper, because if you look at the fact that Nathan MacKinnon, he was the one who actively recruited Drouin. So to me, that really ups the odds that we're going to see him get to play with MacKinnon. If MacKinnon is making it happen himself, he's not saying, come on to Colorado and play on the 4th line. He's saying, bro, come play with me, right? So I think it's a very exciting guy to target at the end of your draft. Maybe looking at a little higher in the draft, not necessarily sleepers, but maybe just breakouts or somebody you're really hot on, Nick. Is there someone that you're going to try and walk out of every draft that you do with this player this year?
So this answer is more dependent on like how big your league is, but the name I can't get out of my head this year for some reason, he's on the Anaheim Ducks. Again, I'm always skeptical of that team, but it's Mason McTavish. It sounds like he's going to center the second line. Alex Killorn, who they signed in the offseason, could play with him. He's going to be on the first power play unit, so that means exposure to the likes of Drysdale and Zegras and guys like that, and Troy Terry. So I like that fit quite a bit. And aside from that, you sort of forget, like last year, Mason McTavish was pegged to potentially win the Calder Trophy, and it went off the rails in the first half, quite frankly. And even with that, guys, still scored an easy 17 goals and 43 points. So you wonder now he's got his feet under him in the NHL. The Ducks are maybe a bit more improved than they were a year ago at this time. If he can at least get to 60 or 65 points this season, because it's a league where you just remember, what's transpired the last 6 to 8 months. But like, there's a reason why Mason McTavish was so highly touted in the COVID era, what he did in junior hockey. And I wonder if he gets to that next threshold offensively next year. So that's like sort of my sleeper / like bounce, breakout candidate, if you will, is Mason McTavish with the Anaheim Ducks. You guys like that play?
I do. Anything Anaheim Ducks, I'm kind of I'm
Yeah.
happy about right now. I know that it's still probably not going to be a great year for them, but I love how they're going all youth this year. And if Olen Zellweger, assuming he makes the team, that's just going to be so much fun. He's also, let's not forget McTavish when he had the dominant World Junior Tournament in 2022. Zellweger was the one creating a lot of that damage. So I like that. So, Nick, what's the one top 100 player in the league that you're avoiding like the plague this season?
It depends, I guess, on rankings, which I think are always subjective. I love people coming at me in my mentions. Like, whatever. I put rankings together. I feel good. Matt, I'm sure you feel the same way. But the name I can't escape right now is Vitek Vanacek, just because I felt this way from day one last year when he went from Washington to New Jersey. It's Vitek Vanacek. And maybe, he's found his game at the right point in his career. But I have to think there's regression coming with New Jersey's crease. And then Akira Schmid's a guy who's been pushing for the last 6 to 8 months in that crease as well. So I wonder if he, dukes it out for some more playing time. But I think where he's being drafted, Vitek Vanacek would be my answer. Some other guys I would throw out there, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I just don't know if he can play the same way he did last year in terms of point production. Everything was going his way, the puck luck. I think he's more a guy better suited for 110 to, 130 in terms of fantasy ranking. So I'm probably steering clear based on ADP. And Mark Stone is the other, like coming off an unbelievable Stanley Cup playoffs, but we all know that back issue isn't going away for the rest of his career. And you wonder if every regular season he will be limited, but you know what you can get in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I know you asked for one, but I gave you 3. I'm sorry.
I like the answers, and it's true. Mark Stone, he's pretty much on my forever avoidance because of the back issues. Sorry, Mark. And the Vanacek answer, that's music to my ears as someone who at the last minute, our keeper declaration deadline in my league, I decided not to keep Vanacek because I was hearing the Akira Schmid footsteps and still worrying about a trade. So I like having that opinion validated. So, Nick, earlier on the show, Steven and I were talking about the Leafs goaltending situation, how we might see it playing out. But obviously, you're a Leaf guy, not just a fantasy guy. So let's combine your 2 areas of expertise and predict the number of starts that we're going to see from Ilya Samsonov, from Joseph Woll. And hey, if you want to throw in some Martin Jones starts, be my guest.
I like it. I'm always weary of playing the prediction game because, again, as you guys know, the crease is as volatile as it's ever been. Like I'm calling for a goaltending summit one summer. I will get it, but it's just so different. So what I have slotted right now, and it's not going to work out this way, so don't quote me on it, although I'm recorded right now, is Samsonov for 50 starts, Joseph Woll for 32. Martin Jones, I'm not sold he gets through waivers. Like that's the only way. And then on top of that, does that mean he's going to the AHL? Again, a lot can change in the next month. Who knows what happens in training camp? But like, I'm not sold Martin Jones actually plays a game in the regular season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's more so because I think he could be elsewhere because we all know what happens in training camp. Guys gets banged up or somebody's put on waivers or somebody doesn't work out or somebody stinks. Like there's so many variables that can happen when it comes to the crease. So I don't know if Martin Jones is going to play. So that's the way I would divvy it up, but I don't think that's going to happen. Because I think they're going to need at least a third goalie. I just don't know if it's going to be Martin Jones. So I'll go 50 starts for Samsonov, 32 for Joseph Woll.
And we know that there will definitely be a bunch of injuries because it's the Leafs goaltending situation, and that's what happens all the time. And it'd be disappointing if it be Woll, a guy who has had to face so many injuries. But I kind of feel confident in that goalie group. I don't know if I'm alone there. I kind of do. It's because you get 2 goalies with a lot to prove still. Yeah. Samson's got to prove that he's the long-term guy, and Woll's like this highly sought-after prospect for a while that finally has a chance to kind of prove himself.
I get that. Like, again, it's tough because, like, what has this league proven now with Aiden Hill winning a Stanley Cup, right? And there has been guys in the last couple of years, like even Jordan Binnington I'd put in that company where he's more like a flash in the pan than a guy who's been a stud for 15 years. Like, I understand where he came from. But like even with Woll, like weirdly enough, I'm still not sold he's an NHL goalie, and it's more so because of the sample size. What has he made 11 appearances in the NHL, like something like that? Like he hasn't played very much, and I think the good thing going for him is that he's older, right? He's mid-20s as opposed to one of these young goalies, so maybe he can stomach a bit more. I think the one thing I've been impressed with in Woll's early career is like his fortitude. Like he can bounce right back after a crappy goal or something like that, which I think you need. I think is a bit tougher to learn earlier on in his career. And at the very least, I want to see him push Ilya Samsonov. I think it's part of the reason why they gave Samsonov a 1-year contract is because they feel really highly. And I think if Samsonov does not play well, he knows there's a guy who is fully capable behind him in Joseph Woll. But again, I have my questions with both goalies, including the third string netminder. I think you look at Martin Jones last year, his record suggests he was good. The save percentage, probably not. I had him in fantasy hockey. You knew he's probably surrendering 4 or 5 goals, but he might win the game, right? So I think with every team, there's going to be those question marks. The Leafs defensively, there are surely, I should say, question marks. I think they found their game defensively as a team in the last couple of years, but as we know, you need goaltending to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So like that's one of my curious questions for the season for this team.
I did a mini scout poll a couple of days ago, and I asked I think it was 11 scouts, kind of what are your thoughts on Joseph Woll, and actually 7 of them thought that he was not an NHL caliber goalie. So kind of an interesting little fact there. Wow. Okay, well, I guess the last question I'll have for you though is, speaking of goalies, what's the first goalie off your board this season, and what pick would you take him at?
This is tough because I think there's a couple different guys. I'm eternally faithful to Andrei Vasilevsky just because he's won me like multiple fantasy titles and he's an absolute stud. And I guess it depends on Tampa. Like they've been stripped of a lot of their depth here this year, especially in the bottom 6. But I still think when healthy, Vasi's the best goaltender on the planet, best fantasy goalie on the planet. So I'd probably take him in the 18 to 20 mark. But I don't think you would lose sleep at night going after Shesterkin or Ottinger. That's my top 3. I know people are high on Sorokin. I'm not crazy about what the Islanders did this summer, so I wonder if the wins could be a bit off for Sorokin and the heavy playing time. We just talked about the volatility of the position. So either one of those 3 guys, Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, or Ottinger, the 18 to 20 mark, again, you got to gauge this on the goalie run. If one guy takes a goalie, then you have to jump on the next one, I think, rather quickly if you want that stud. But anywhere in that range, I would feel comfortable, guys.
I like it. I don't have Vasilevsky number 1. I have him number 3, though. And I do think we're going to get a huge bounce back from him. I think people forget he's only 29 years old. In goalie years, that's not very old. And what's really exciting to me about Vasi is he hasn't played since April. We have not been able to say that about him since the start of the 2019-20 season. He's rested this time. So I am predicting a massive rebound, if you will, pun intended, from Andrei Vasilevsky. Nick, this has been amazing. As always, excellent insight. And if anyone's listening or watching, you can find Nick's top 250 player rankings on dailyfaceoff.com right now. And Nick, before we let you go with that lovely blue background, anything you want to plug? When's the show coming back?
So we haven't announced that, but I'll announce this on this podcast since I'm the first guest of season number 2 of Puck Poolies. What's going on? October 2nd is the plan for the live show to come back. We haven't formally announced that, but if you do watch this or listen to this and you hear that, congratulations. You're one of the very few to know that. We're excited about season number 2. We're coming back bigger and better. I think we're going to go a bit longer as well. And just generally excited for another riveting season of Maple Leaf hockey, only to find out what this team is going to do 8 months from now. But we'll see how this journey goes, guys.
Amazing. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for giving us the little piece of breaking news on Puck Poolies. Who knew? Cheers, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thanks so much to Nick. Always a great guest. And Steven, we're going to talk a little bit of prospect right now. And I'm very curious to learn about the name that you're tabling today. This is someone who I have a hard time projecting. So let's consider class in session. Tell us about Jakob Pelletier on the Calgary Flames.
It's funny because I didn't include Pelletier in my top 20 prospects for the Calder Trophy, but he originally was. And this is someone who in the AHL has absolutely nothing to prove. He's been over a point per game player now. Just a great dual threat as a shooter, as a passer, good skater. But, unfortunately, the Calgary Flames of last year, they weren't really too interested in giving a lot of ice time to guys that are 5'9". And the thing about Calgary is, while Arizona's got like the world's largest prospect pool in terms of physical size, like every player is like 6 foot 1,000. Calgary's the complete opposite, where you look at Dustin Wolf's a small goalie, and then you got Jakob Pelletier, who's 5'9". But I think that he's such a talented player, and Flames fans are kind of asking for him to take that next step. Now, with a new coach, could that change? To be interesting to see. Now, he played 24 games last year. Can't say he was anything overly incredible. He had 7 points, but part of that was the opportunities were just not great. He was, he's good on the power play. He didn't get any of those those minutes. He was playing a lot of defensive game. Well, sure, but he's a point producer and a guy like that. You're like, he's not a physical player going out there and throwing hits. You need him to put in a scoring role. I think, with the Calgary Flames, it'll be interesting to see what happens with this team. I think it's more of a look at the team itself, where there's all these rumors of all these guys not going to sign next year. Are they going to trade those players mid-season? I'd say probably not. You want to hold on to those guys as long as possible, but they traded Tyler Toffoli, so who knows? So it'd be interesting to kind of see if opportunities do come out of here. But I think he's got to be on that opening night roster. He's a free agent next summer, so I believe restricted free agent. So he'll want to try to maximize that value. This would be the time to do it. So I think this is a good prove me year. Hey, we've seen what you do in the AHL. Sure, our old coach didn't really give you those chances. Let's see what you could do here now. Prove yourself. I think that could be a nice little sleeper potential there.
I like it, and I do think it'll be very interesting to see how Calgary deploys its young players this year. Also, Matt Coronado, just with Daryl Sutter, the elephant in the room is gone. So with Ryan Huska in there as coach, maybe the door will be open for more of a youth movement. We'll see what happens in Calgary, but it's fun. At least we don't have to write off any prospect as fantasy relevant in Calgary anymore with Mr. Sutter out the door. So, Stephen, let's talk about best bets. And this is going to be a fun one, okay? Because I tweeted this week about Cole Caulfield being a Rocket Richard Trophy sleeper, and people lost their minds. I don't know what happened. I was harassed from the moment I sent that tweet to the moment I went to bed. People just went absolutely crazy. I said that Cole Caulfield was like my number 8th ranked guy for the Rocket Richard, but I'm going to double down here, okay? I'm going to take a stand and explain why. He is a very intriguing bet. If you look at the odds right now on Betano, plus 6,400 for the Rocket Richard. That makes him the 16th ranked guy in the odds, okay? So this is the person supposedly with the 16th best chance to lead the league in goals. 48 goals in 83 games since Martin St. Louis took over as his coach. The Short Kings unite, and obviously he's unlocked Cole Caulfield. Over that span, 83 games, 5-on-5. The only players who average more goals per 60 minutes are David Pastrnak and Austin Matthews. So again, if you're keeping score, 48 goals in his last full season, 3rd best goal scorer in the league at 5-on-5 since Martin St. Louis took over, 16th best Rocket Richard odds. That does not add up. That is the definition of larceny if you're placing a long shot futures bet. Calm down if you're looking at this video. I'm not saying that Cole Caulfield is going to win the Rocket Richard, you maniacs. What I'm saying is he's a great long shot bet, and his under-the-radar metrics, 5-on-5 scoring, is a better indicator of future scoring because it's more reliable. Based on all that information, I love Cole Caulfield as a long shot bet. I think it's entirely possible he gets that big 45, 50-goal season, maybe even more. So make that your long shot bet. Stephen, what do you think? Am I crazy or not?
So here's what I'll say. I don't think he's going to win the Rocket Richard, but that's the point. This is a long shot bet, and I like those odds, to be honest. I think because we missed so much of him last year, I think it's hard to remember just how good he actually was playing before he got hurt there on a team that gave him no support. So we kind of expect him to get a lot of that ice time, a lot of those opportunities again this year. That's not going to change. As long as he stays healthy, I think 50 is definitely possible.
Okay, so I feel validated. I'm not going to get harassed again on this show by my co-host, but we'll see what happens when we release the video clip of this. I'm ready for it. Bring it on. Stephen, we have a nice collection of questions this week, so let's get to them. What do we have from the mailbag?
Well, again, thank you everybody for asking questions. I know it's been kind of a while since we've been back into doing regular episodes, but good to see you guys are all back. And actually, again, it seems like the support's been really good recently, so thank you. Sal Langford says, "Hey guys, so happy you're back." So are we. What's your belief in Thatcher Demco hitting it big this year? Lots of potential, but still feels like there's more he needs to do.
Thanks for the question, Sal. I'm happy that we're back too. Thank you. So I've always been a big believer in Thatcher Demco. He has the pedigree. He has the size. He's athletic. I think he's mentally tough. And I mentioned the same kind of makeup for Joseph Woll, but he's always felt like a number one goaltender to me. And yes, he struggled last year with injuries, but from the moment he came back, 11-4-1, 918 save percentage. So he was very much back to the normal Thatcher Demco. The other thing to factor in is you might say, well, what about the team in front of him? They're a little bit mediocre, but they were a better defensive team when Rick Tocchet took over. So his expected goals against Thatcher Demco before Tocchet was 2.95 with Bruce Boudreau there. After Tocchet, expected goals against per 60, 2.60. So that's a huge drop. Much better defensive play in front of him. And he looked much better after getting healthy. So to me, I think the ingredients are there for Demko to bounce back, maybe be a top 12 fantasy goalie. And even just as I sort of did the research for this question, I realized I'm probably going to be boosting Demko in my next update of the rankings now that I see that underlying data.
Yep, I like that one. Jeremy Squire, so let's keep talking about goalies. Jeremy Squire asks, which goaltender do you foresee beating the odds to become a fantasy steal this year?
Okay, so a couple that I like, we've already discussed at length on the show. So Joseph Woll, Devin Levi. So I'm going to offer a third name for you. Okay, Jeremy. And it's Carl Melka, the Arizona Coyotes.
That was going to be my
All
pick.
right, there you go. We're on the same page. I love it. So to me, he's been a quality goalie since he got into the league. He just has had no help in front of him. But if you look at the Coyotes now, they have added Jason Zucker, Alexander Kerfoot, Nick Bugstad, Matt Dumba, Sean Dursey, Logan Cooley turning pro. This team just looks night and day different this season. And if Melka is already keeping his head above water, what if this Coyotes team suddenly is like, I don't know, maybe they're an 85, 90-point team, but knocking on the door of the playoff fringe? In that scenario, I think Melka suddenly becomes possible top 15 fantasy goalie. So to me, he's a good deep sleeper. Other one to keep an eye on, we talked about Calgary Flames prospects, Dustin Wolf, if they can find a way to get him onto the NHL roster. He's obviously one of the best prospects in the world at his position.
Yep, I can't argue with that one. Two others I'll offer up is Spencer Knight. We got to know Florida when it comes to Bobrovsky. You never know what you're going to expect. We saw the playoff run, awesome. But Spencer Knight, if he's healthy, he's all this time to kind of get back into the swing of things. It'd be interesting to see if he bounces back and becomes that goalie I think everyone expects him to be. And another is I just feel like everyone has forgotten that Logan Thompson exists. I'm still a huge fan of Logan Thompson. He'd be like, it was looking like if I was picking if the Olympics were happening in February of 2023, it was not going, obviously. Logan Thompson was my starting goalie for Team Canada. So there's that. Bradley asks, who would you rather have, Pasta or Matty Tkachuk? Now, he didn't say Pastrnak, because I do like, depending on the type of pasta where you're getting it from, is pretty good. But what are your thoughts?
True, and pasta was lowercase, so it's like, would I rather have a nice like rigatoni bolognese or Matthew Tkachuk? I don't know. It's a tough question. But if we're talking David Pastrnak, again, I have to kind of cop out here, Brad, because I have them ranked literally side by side. So I'm basically flipping a coin already. I think their value is that close. I have Tkachuk at number 6 overall, Pastrnak number 7. To me, I dropped Pastrnak a little bit based on what I would have had him last season, just because of the supporting cast problem. But if we see it's not JVR, and if it's Brad Marchand is on that top line or Jake DeBrusk going into the season, as we mentioned earlier in the show, then I could see myself bumping Pasta back up maybe to the top 5. And with Tkachuk, obviously he's coming off the sternum injury. You have to keep an eye on that. But when I talked to him after the season, I did talk to him, and he indicated like he was going to rest up, but there was no worry early on that he was going to miss any time to start the season. So I assume that's still the case. I think Tkachuk's ceiling a little bit higher in a banger format. Obviously, Pastrnak much higher ceiling in goals. So again, splitting hairs. I have Tkachuk right now. I could see myself flip-flopping them, but it's real. It's an actual coin flip for me.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't want to be the one having to choose between the two. I'd be happy with whoever I picked of those two. And then Neftali Clinton. Daily Faceoffs. Who would you rather draft in a one-year league, Ovechkin or Crosby? I think my pick's easy, but what's yours?
Yeah, I think this is easy too. If it's a points-only league, it's Crosby. He's going to outscore Ovechkin probably by 10 or more points. If it's any other format, then you're going Alex Ovechkin. He's going to score more goals. He's going to get more hits. He's going to get more shots. Case closed.
Yeah, no question for me there. Erik Karlsson also being on there on the power play is going to make that power play actually usable for the first time in quite a long time. We got a two-parter here from Ranton and Raven, one of our good buddies here. Try my first auction league this year. We have a $200 cap and 20-man teams. What's your max bid on McDavid?
Yeah, it's a tough question. So the way I would break this down is basically McDavid is 2 75-point players put together, right? So, and a 75-point player is like reasonably valuable. Maybe that would be worth a quarter of your budget. So if you have 2 75-point players in one, I think you can blow half your budget. I would spend up to $100 of your $200 cap on Connor McDavid.
Yeah, Connor McDavid's like a league winner. Like, not to go back to the league winner discussion earlier, but Connor McDavid is Connor McDavid.
He's the league winner, yeah.
yeah, you kind of need him if you can get him. And another question from him is: when it's your turn to nominate a player for bidding, do you select a player you want or a player you think will start a bidding war that you may have little interest in? I could tell you that I really abused that last year, and one of the players I abused it on was Jonathan Huberdeau. And guess what? That worked out well for me.
Yeah, I love this question, and it's something I've thought a lot about because my fantasy football league is an auction league. So I've really honed my strategy over the years. And what you do, it depends on the flow of the auction. Okay, so let's say there are many players left still on the board that you like at a position. In that case, I think you want to be bleeding as much money as you can on players you don't want. So nominating high-profile players that you're not interested in over and over. Just keep getting people to spend big on the position that you don't need or the player that you don't want. And then when it comes time to make your big bid, then you're going to have less competition. But if you're reaching a juncture, you're sort of deeper into the auction and you're seeing a drop off. So let's say you don't have your starting goalie yet and there are two really good ones left on the board. You need to know if you're going to get one of them because that's going to affect how you spend. Or if you're going to go zero goalie and to go cheap and you're going to spend more on forward. So in that case, when it's your turn to nominate, I think you got to force the issue and put the player up and just find out if you're going to get that player or not. So auction strategy, keep it pretty elastic, change based on where you are in terms of what's happening during your auction.
There was one last year was my first time doing an auction league draft, and one of the guys that we had in it, Mariano, who's a listener of this show, I had we kind of as a joke started putting up players like Chad Rudel on Pittsburgh who had like no points, and Chad Chris and a couple other guys that were not even in the NHL anymore, and putting those guys up for auction, and he bid on almost all of them, which is kind of funny. He made the draft a little more fun that way. So shout out to Mariano. But I guess that's kind of it for the questions. And this is a starting lineup to close things out that I really like. And it's naming your favorite cities to visit. And it doesn't have to be hockey related. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I like this city because they have great restaurants in front of their. No, like, give me your favorite cities in the world to visit.
Yeah, this is a really tough one. Before I dive in, I wanted to just throw out one funny auction thing. I was in a fantasy football draft, and the Atlanta Falcons had Julio Jones, but they also had Julian Jones, who showed up as J. Jones with the Falcons logo. So somebody nominated him at the beginning, and then somebody bid on it and spent a bunch of money on Julian Jones. It was awesome. Okay, so this is a great question. It's really tough. A few honorable mentions, places that I really enjoy going to: Nashville, Chicago, New Orleans, Paris, Rome, Venice, Barcelona. This sounds like I'm James Bond just hopping the globe. These are places I've visited over a 20-year span, okay? So I'm not just yachting around the globe, I wish. In terms of my top 6, okay, I'm taking some liberties. I don't know if all of these are considered cities, but we'll find out, okay? Number 6, Kennebunkport, Maine. So East Coast is a place my family's gone for years. It's where my mom's parents' ashes are buried off a rock wall. Not buried, they're put in the sea off the rock wall. It's just a great place to go in the fall. Amazing seafood, the best seafood I've ever had, the best lobster I've ever had, best clam chowder I've ever had. Really nice beach. And it's kind of cool to go during the cold weather season because it's quieter there and just a beautiful place. Number 5, Nice in France. France. I sound like a douche. But the south of France is an absolutely beautiful place. The food there is amazing. I enjoyed the nightlife there too. I went there in my early 20s. So much to do there. And just such easy access to other areas. So stay in Nice and you can go to Monaco or Cannes in the course of a day. Really quick trip. So a lot of flexibility there and just an absolutely beautiful place. Number 4, Las Vegas. Las Vegas is not necessarily the most stylish place to go. It doesn't have the most character, but it's probably the place I'm most comfortable. I've been there so many times in my life. It's the place I've spent the most time that I haven't lived in. So I can sort of just wander the city and know exactly where everything is. I'm very comfortable there. I've taken a lot of reporters to an awesome restaurant in a strip mall called Batista's Hole in the Wall. Really kitschy Italian food, unlimited, bad, free wine. White and red, both served ice cold. It's amazing. Number 3, I don't know if this counts as a city, but Santorini, Greece. It's where I went on my honeymoon. I've never been to a place that felt so much like you're on another planet. Like you're on top of a crater of a volcano. You're way above sea level. Like you're walking mountains to get from town to town, and you're just so far away. I've never felt so successfully disconnected from technology and phones, and you just feel like you're just totally free. So most relaxing place I've ever been. Number 2, Montreal. I just never have a bad time there. The draft was so much fun last year. I just think it's a great city. It's a beautiful city. It has a lot of character. The food is great. I love the nightlife. And there's just so much to do. And it's also a place that has this very, stylish vibes to it as well. It's just a cool place to go. I just love everything about Montreal. Never have a bad time there. Number one, New York. Some people are West Coast people. Some people are East Coast. I'm more of an East Coast person. I love the liveliness of New York. I'm a very hyper person. So I love being in all the chaos and the action. I feel very at home there. Amazing sports venues, amazing history, amazing restaurants, amazing places to go, shows, whatever it is. There's a million things to do there. And it's just such a vibrant place. So that's my number one. I haven't been there since 2015. Excited to go back.
All right. I didn't even, I had a couple I wanted to offer up, and you've mentioned two of them. Montreal, Nashville, again, kind of for the same reasons. They're just great. Daytona Beach, just because I love going to the Daytona 500. And New York City, I love giant cities. It's funny because I almost want to move to a very small town and not be anywhere near a city. It's either small city or small town with nothing going on, or major city with everything going on all the time. There's no in between.
Yeah. I totally feel you. I like to live in the chaos and then escape to the chill. So that's sort of my vibe. So you're in the action and then you take a break. So you go somewhere quiet on a vacation is always fun.
See, that's kind of why like my ideal vacation the last little bit's been, camping's actually a lot of fun. You go in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of like low effort. It just do whatever you want. I don't love traveling for vacations. I don't care to go sightseeing. I don't care to go to Europe just to go and just see something. Like I want to take part in something, but also I like the idea of not just spending so much time of it traveling too. So there's kind of things about that. So that's how
especially in this era of crazy flight delays, you basically have to give up an entire day for travel. So it is a legitimate consideration. Well, that is the end of this episode. It was a nice, meaty one. I think we're going to really get back in the swing of things. And like I said at the start of the show, we are now back to our full season schedule because we know you're going to need some help with your fantasy draft prep. We are here for you with lots more tips, advice, and guests. Thank you for listening and watching. We'll see you next week.